Welcome to the Landscaping Podcast. My name is Joel Barnett and I am your host. And in today's episode, it's a bit of a different one. So it's a chat I did with Dan Foreman from Dan Scrapes at the Melbourne Home Show, which was back in end of August. So Dan was there for 3 days at the home show and he organised a range of speakers. So I'll run through some of the other ones in a moment. But Dan and I were just chatting. It's kind of directed at the public. But there'll be a bit to learn for everyone throughout it. A little bits of tips and tricks along the way. There's something I spoke about getting clients how to choose the right landscaper. So choosing someone who is compatible with you, so not just because you like their work, but you get along well with as well, because it's a close relationship you can have with them throughout the build. And also the importance of making a plan, like having a landscape plan to work towards, and how much better it is to do things in stages as you can afford to do them, rather than doing the whole garden on what you can afford right at the start. Because if you're going to be there, if the client's going to live in the place for a long time, they're better off doing something over a longer period that they'll enjoy, rather than just what they can offer a limited budget to start with. So if you head to the Melbourne Home Show website, on their Facebook page, you'll be able to see all these other speakers as well, who I'll mention in a second. So it's a good resource to go through for landscapers and the general public as well. So Dan's chats go for maybe 30 to 60 minutes. That was over a few days at the Melbourne Home Show, and he's also doing the Brisbane Home Show. I think that might be on the 10th of September. So this coming weekend when this episode's released. So if you're in the Brisbane area, when you want to have a listen to some other chats that Dan's doing, head on down there. And if you go, I'll put the link to the Melbourne Home Show Facebook page in the notes of this episode. But just these are the people who Dan had a chat to, and they've uploaded the chats to their page. So there's Ashley James from Ashley James Gardens, Andrew Hopkins from Hopkins Construction, Brent Reed from Candio, Lily Sabo from Sabo Design, Renee Reeder from Nvidia Landscapes, Mark Browning from Mark Browning Landscape Design, Matt York from Budling Design, Chris from Full Potential Landscapes. He talks to Wombat about sustainability. And there's also a chat between Dan and Wombat. So Wombat was on the block several years ago, and he's a big sustainability champion. Ben Hutchison from Ben Hutchison Landscapes, Mitch Farina from Bespoke Landscapes, Riley Cooper from Riley Cooper Landscape Design and Horticulture, Tim from Tread Sculptures, and Toby from Shapescaper. So they're talking about couple of the products that they supplied for the show, and Candice from Lilydale Instant Lawn, and then Shane and Eugene, who helped Dan build the display. So obviously a lot of chats on there, and they're all 30 to 60 minute chats. So if you wanted to have a listen to one of them, follow the link to the Melbourne Home Show Facebook page. But my chat's on there also, and it does get cut off halfway through, but this episode doesn't, because I had a backup recording. So here's my chat with Dan Foreman at the Melbourne Home Show.
So first of all, guys, welcome to the Home Show. We're lucky enough to have a special guest here in Joel Barnett. Now, if you don't know Joel, he has his own landscape company called InStyle Gardens. Amazing landscape company based out of, I'm going to say, on the Geelong side of town. Yep. So Joel also, not only is he a fantastic landscaper, he also runs a podcast called the Landscape Podcast, and he's got only the best and finest landscapers on that podcast. So if you have time, make sure you check out that podcast, because there's some amazing landscapers on there. I can't think of any off the top of my head, but only the best in the business on that podcast. So make sure you check that out, the Landscape Podcast. And we're going to talk to Joel today about construction. Joel does a lot of construction work for a lot of high-end landscape designers. So we'll talk about the process and how it all works and sort of go from there. So welcome, mate.
Thank you, Dan. I appreciate being here. Thank
you. Now,
this
is awkward because a while back you interviewed me and now I'm interviewing you.
Yeah, Dan was referring to himself as one of the landscape guests.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. I was on your podcast, wasn't I?
Yeah,
Shit,
good
there
episode.
You go. So I got a lot of flack on the podcast because he asked me to talk a bit about myself, and I went on for probably about half an hour. So
at least, yeah.
I'm still copping flack for that. But basically, Joel set this up. He interviews not necessarily well-known designers as well, and landscape construction guys, but just people in the industry who do sort of different stuff. And yeah, it's sort of worked out pretty well. Talk a little bit about the podcast, mate, if you don't hardly mind.
Yeah, so the reason because I love listening to podcasts, so I wanted to create one because there weren't enough Australian landscaping podcasts, because I listen to a lot of US ones and they do things differently over there. So I thought the best way to hear about the way Australian landscapers do things is to ask them my own questions. So that's what started me doing it. And I've had people who have been in business for 2 years and people who have been in business for 30 years. So there's a full range of people on there. And even the ones in 2 years, you learn something from them. So it's there's good value in there for people who are starting their business. And there's a lot of people who are just home gardeners who listen as well. So yeah, I love talking about landscaping, so that's why I wanted to do it as well. And it's good, yeah, meeting a lot of good people on there, like Dan. That was the first time I had a good chat with him, and make good friendships out of that.
And do you find, obviously, from you're a landscaper yourself, do you find it quite insightful to hear the different styles and the different way people go about running their landscape business and running the landscape design business?
Yeah, especially because landscaping is such a broad term for what we do, because there's so many different trades that you do within landscaping. So there's carpentry, bricklaying, excavation, lighting, irrigation, paving, concreting, there's a million different things you do. So, and within each of those things that we do, there's different ways to do it. So there's not one way to build a deck and not one way to do paving. So it is fascinating hearing the different way people do things, and there's not necessarily a right and a wrong way. There's different levels of how people do it to achieve the same good result at the end.
I've been talking to people about doing homework and making sure you look into, do a bit of background work on landscapers, landscape designers before you sort of go too deep into the process. And I mean, the Landscape Podcast is a fantastic way of looking at different landscapers and seeing what they're about. And you'll find everyone's got a different sort of style, a different approach to how they go about things. Would you highly recommend that people actually use that podcast? Obviously, they can sit at bed, home in bed before they go to sleep or whatever, and use that as an actual tool to see what sort of landscapers they could use for their own projects?
Yeah, that is a really important part, is not just flicking through Google or the other pages to find a landscape, but finding one that works for you, because there's so many different landscapers out there, and a lot of people do good work, but you want to find someone who works well with you, because they're going to be spending at least a few weeks to a few months at your property every day. So you want to find someone who you get along well with. So you might find two people who do just as good quality work, but it's more important getting someone who you get along well with, because there's things that come up along the way that they might need to talk to you about. There might be variations because they find something underground when they're digging. So it's good to get someone you get along with. And listening to the podcast is good because you can hear the way the landscapers think about things. And you'll hear, like I mentioned on there, a lot of times that I understand why clients don't know how much they want to spend on their landscaping, because I'll look at a project for the first time and not have a clue how much it's going to cost, and I've been landscaping for 18 years. So you can't expect clients who have just started to know what something's going to cost. So yeah, there's a lot of things like that where you'll get inside the mind of the landscaper before they come out, so it gives you a different point of view.
It's very important, I think, the trust point of view. I've probably harped on about it a few times with a couple of different guests, but finding someone who you feel a connection with and you feel like you can trust, because it's a massive outlay of money. It's a big investment for a lot of people, and if you don't have that connection, or if you feel like something's not right in that initial consultation, it's only right to be honest with someone and say, listen, I just don't think you're right for my project. I don't mean that in any bad way, but how important is having that conversation early before going too deep into a construction sort of situation?
Yeah, it's really good. Just 2 weeks ago, I spoke with Dan Harold, who's a pretty well-known designer in Sydney, and he said he's got a 9-minute rule where if he doesn't feel like the project's going well within the first 9 minutes of meeting the client, he'll walk away, because if it's not good from the start, then it's not going to, usually doesn't get any better. And communication is a really important part throughout the project as well. So if you don't get along well with your landscaper and you pick up something that you might want to fix, you're going to be more hesitant to go out and talk to them, because you don't want to create an awkward moment. Whereas if you get along well with them, you'll go out straight away and you won't have a problem, and vice versa. It goes both ways.
And that's what I love with a lot of people we've had come in and out. Everyone has a different genre, a different style of whether it's landscape or landscape design. And I think all of our guest speakers, if they feel like that it's not their part of landscaping or their style of landscape design, they will do the right thing and move that on to someone who they know would actually work in that situation. And that's invaluable, I think. There's nothing worse than having a designer or a landscaper trying to do something they've never done before, because it's a risk they're taking on your money, on your time, you know what I mean? So, having those people and having those guys who are actually honest about what their product is and only pitching their product, not trying to come outside of lanes, super important.
Yeah, and if anyone saw Ben Hutchison just before, he's a perfect example. So if you want native gardens, that's right up his alley, or natural gardens. And if they're not, he won't say yes to it. And I'm the same. If someone says they want a native garden, like, I can do it, but you can get people who they've got a lot more passion for doing that as well. So they're a better person to get to do that kind of garden. So you want to find someone whose passion is in what you want as well, so you share the same passion.
Yeah, beautiful. And also you do not only landscapers, but also some suppliers as well on the podcast?
Yeah, I've done a couple. They've been the least popular episodes because people think we're trying to sell to them.
Yep.
But they're not paying me to come on. I'm just curious about seeing their side of things as well. So there will be more of them as well. But yeah, because I've just got a curious interest for the whole industry, not just designers and builders and maintenance people. But yeah, the way, because we had a paving guy on there as well. So yeah, it's just, I like to get an overall view, and then some people are going to enjoy those episodes and some won't.
Yeah.
But not every episode is to every person. So.
Yeah, I think they're definitely episodes where obviously clients could definitely take something out of those episodes, because obviously knowing the product is really important from a client point of view, and understanding how a product works and all the rest of it. Obviously, you're not going to have someone who's just going to keep flogging their product, because that's not what it's about. So whoever's coming on the podcast is obviously someone who you obviously think is have a genuinely great product, and then they talk about all the different processes and all the different ideas of that product and how it can be used and all the rest of it. So it's not a matter of flogging the product, it's about you guys knowing the best products on the market. So if a contractor comes to you and says, oh, we're going to use this, you have a bit of knowledge about, well, actually, I did a bit of research into that product, and I think, maybe this is a different product we should go with. Because what you might find is some more generic style contractors will usually stay within a certain lane where they know they can do a certain job, make good margin, and then stick with that product. That's where it's really important that you go and do your homework on and look at past jobs that the actual contractor's done, and see if it's something that's actually relative to what you want to do yourself. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, and a good thing is Instagram these days, because like websites, no one used to update them anywhere near enough, and mine's the same. Like that project I finished 2 years ago, and that one was 3 years ago, and they're the two main ones on the website. So even I don't update it, but Instagram is so easy, so everyone updates it nearly weekly. So you can look at that to see the type of projects they do, but you also need to keep in mind that that's sort of the highlight reel of their projects. So if they make a mistake, they're not usually putting that on Instagram. So you can't take it all in as though they're always perfect like that and always doing these amazing projects. But yeah, it's a good way to get an understanding of what their style is and how good their projects are.
So you obviously do some really high-end landscaping for some amazing landscape designers. How nice is it to be able to get that call and have that call from a landscape designer and saying, hey, Joel, can you please come and quote this job? We'd love to have a quote from you for this project.
It's almost something that, like at the start when I was getting those projects, I was really pumped about it, and now it's a bit I don't know, arrogant to say, but they're always like that now, so it's not as exciting.
Yep.
And you don't necessarily make as much money on the fancy looking projects as you do the basic ones. So there's pros and cons to them, but it's a plan I set about doing 7 years ago. I wanted to work for the top designers, and now we're doing that. So it is really exciting to sit back and reflect on. But yeah, everything's so busy now, you almost haven't got time to sit back and think of what you're doing.
Yep.
But these two projects are by two different designers who would be my favourite two designers. So yeah, it is pretty cool to get those projects. And again, like I love doing this kind of work. And that photo there is a good example of one of the supplier guests I had on the podcast. It sells a product called Top Buxus. So with that hedge, that's Japanese box, which most people use more now than English box, because English box gets something called blight on there. And I found this product called Top Buxus stops getting that disease. So when you get those suppliers on, it's about educating people about the products that exists, because most people don't know about that. Yeah, that's why I did that one. That's relevant to the photo that was on there.
And obviously, Steve Taylor is a great example of a really great landscape designer. You've done a bit of work with Steve, and I mean, I'm a massive fan of Steve's work. I mean, the way he sort of works those curves in and makes that flow with those natural sort of curves. It's a real art, isn't it? And it must feel great to be able to bring that stuff sort of to life.
Yeah, Steve Taylor's from Cos Design, and he's without a doubt my number one favourite designer. So not that project, but the other one he designed. And yeah, getting that first design from him was pretty exciting. And yeah, if I had to pick another designer to design my garden, it'd be him. But luckily, I copy a lot of his ideas, so it'll look like his anyway.
Have you got that kind of money? Have you?
No, just to design myself. I can build it.
Yeah. So I mean, that's what I mean. And I suppose the point I'm trying to get across is, sometimes it is expensive to go through the process of getting a really good designer and a really good landscaper, but there's so many years of knowledge and expertise that come with that. That's what you're paying for. You know what I mean? These guys tick the boxes, everything, criterially, everything's sorted. They know everything that you want. They work to your lifestyle, and it's sometimes people don't even understand what they want until these people actually come along and put it in their garden. They go, wow, that's I never even thought of that, but that's actually amazing that we can do that. So yes, it's an expensive sort of exercise, but you're getting the best of the best for a reason. I know there's definitely other people out there who have a big name, but you know, it's knowing, once again, doing your homework and making sure that style of landscape is going to work with what you're actually got, what the idea you've got inside your head. So, you know, it's what I'm saying is the cost is definitely justified, I believe, in those situations, because obviously you have years and years of knowledge behind you. You know what I mean? So
yeah, and there's a designer for every client as well. So some designers charge $30,000 for a design, and some charge $1,000. So you can find someone within your price range, and hopefully that they kind of meet, you know, your type of personality and the type of project that you want. But something to also consider is that there's natural designers and then there's trained designers. So someone like Dan is amazing at hand drawing sketches, and those designers are usually just naturally gifted, and they just come up with ideas on the spot. And then there's other designers who have done a uni course, and they have to think about everything. It takes a bit longer. It's not quite as natural, but so it's good to get someone who's naturally gifted, and they come up with these unique ideas that like I would never think of. And they're like things like Steve Taylor, he's a natural designer as well. I find it's usually the ones who do hand drawing, because they're very artistic naturally anyway. And yeah, it's usually one or the other.
But that's another, once again, I mean, Steve's loving this because we keep referring to him, but once again, Steve's done a lot of landscaping himself, so he has the background of landscaping, so it's really good from a practical sense to understand how the actual thing's going to come together and how it's going to flow naturally. So that combination of having that construction background and then coming into design and knowing a bit about plants, it's a beautiful combination to have from a landscape design point of view, to be able to sort of execute that and then give that to a great construction sort of landscaper like Joel to then go ahead and he takes all the little bits and pieces out of it that you might find an issue down the track, really, doesn't it?
Yeah, and it's so good when you're as a landscape builder to get a design of someone who has been a landscape builder in the past as well, because they just put a lot more detail, like heights and all sorts of things like that, and they'll think about the paving set out so that there's no cuts against the house, or just really little things that you might not notice if you didn't think about it, but that's the type of thing that they make aware. So it is good to have someone who's got the construction experience, but I also work with designers who haven't got that construction experience, and they do those same level of designs, but just more common with the ones who have had the construction experience.
Yeah, nice. So obviously we've had a pretty rough last 2 years. our industry has absolutely thrived through that because a lot of people are at home and they're thinking more about their gardens. They're not taking those big overseas trips, so they've got that money there. How important is it to actually... we're in this situation where we just want a clean slate. Everyone wants to wipe those last 2 years away and start again. But how important is it to try and utilise it and think about it and put a proper planning process in before you actually start that construction process?
Yeah, a plan before you start is the most important thing you could do. When I built a house, what was it, in 2009, so 13 years ago, and I'd only been working for myself that same year. And I just started doing bits and pieces and put plants here and there. And then I was doing a bit more and ripping things out. And then I realised I should do a plan, and then I've got something to work to. So you don't have to do it all at once, but you have a plan to work to. And that's also a good thing to help with budget. So you're better off doing something, if you're going to be living in the house for a long time, you're better off doing something that you can afford over 3 or 4 years rather than just doing what you can afford in one go. Because if you're going to live there for more than 3 or 4 years, then you might as well get what you want over the long term. So yeah, the design is the most critical part, and then the second most critical is maintenance. There's no good spending all this money on a nice garden to then let weeds grow and just let the plants all die.
And it's just that thought process, because if you're in a position where you can't maintain, you need to think very carefully about how you go about the plants as well. You know what I mean? So having a designer helps with that as well. I mean, there's certainly ways you can do it DIY, but you've got to seek the right information. It's all about making sure you check with the plants, check the plant tags, see the conditions it likes, all that sort of stuff. Very important, because plants aren't cheap these days either. Nothing's cheap these days. So making sure we don't make those mistakes over and over again, because it's going to affect us financially, and it's probably going to affect us financially from a maintenance point of view, because we're constantly trying to trim a tree back or a hedge back that's naturally trying to get bigger than the actual space. It happens all the time, but it's really important to try and make sure we do plan. Even if it's a really basic plan, you need to somewhat think about what's going to go in before you start constructing and putting everything together. That's the key point in any design. We've all been in positions where we've looked at the back and said, nah, bugger it, I'm just going to go out and get plants, going to put them in, going to make it look great, it's going to be fantastic. But you have to think more about what's happening. Otherwise, you're going to end up with a jungle in 5 years' time. It's not going to work, and then you're redoing it again anyways. So using products, products are a huge part of that. Making sure you use products that have, warranties or last the test of time, so you're not replacing everything every three years, you know what I mean? And once again, it comes back to leaning on the right people, but, obviously we've got Shapescaper Steel at the back, 10-year warranty. They would do a lifetime warranty, but it's only coastal areas where they get the salt winds. It's products like that. Yes, it's expensive initially to put in, but you've got to look at the longevity of the garden and look at how much money you're saving by not having to replace it every 2 to 3 years. That's a huge thing.
And it's also important for the landscape designer to ask you how much maintenance you want to do with your garden as well.
Yep.
Because there's no point them designing a high maintenance garden if you work 14 hours a day, 6 days a week. So if they don't ask, you need to communicate that. Nearly everyone wants a low maintenance garden these days, but every garden requires a bit of maintenance. But yeah, having the plan of how much you're wanting to put into it is important in the initial process as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And Joel, just in regards to different styles and things, what's sort of trending and whatnot at the moment? Obviously, you've done a bit of burnished concrete. Yeah, that's a big thing.
Yeah, a little bit. It's been in for a few years now, and still, it's only just getting more popular. Because that is a low maintenance product. So once you put it in, you don't have to do anything to it other than clean it if you spill something on there. But again, like the projects I work on are all modern projects. So what is trending that doesn't necessarily relate across the whole industry. But yeah, using a lot of steel like that core 10 kind of stuff, and a bit of black painted steel as well is pretty common. But yeah, definitely concrete is still up there. Yeah, absolutely. And obviously bluestone paving's another one. Sort of crazy paving's come back with a vengeance. It seems to be everywhere. I mean, I saw a really lovely garden you did recently with travertine crazy pave. Thought that was amazing. Yeah.
I mean, that's a bit different again. Like travertine's often used in more of a formal setting, And to lay it in the crazy paper, how'd you find that?
Yeah, it was awesome to work with, and that's limestone. I think it's starting to get a lot more popular as well.
Yep.
But yeah, using the travertine was amazing, and it's not as expensive as you would think. So the natural stone isn't too much different to concrete paving.
Yep.
Whereas it used to be the concrete was a lot cheaper, but now there's certainly stone that's cheaper than concrete. So
Yep.
you can find a stone that meets your budget, and it looks amazing as well, and it's a lot more rugged than what the concrete is most of the time.
Yep.
Some of the limestone can be a bit softer around the pools, but
Yep.
you can put a hardener on there to fix that. But yeah, I'm doing my house in the next few months, and I'm going to be doing limestone in that. So
Wow.
nice sort of a grey limestone, which will look good against the burnished concrete as well.
Yeah, beautiful.
Similar colours.
And it's knowing the characteristics of the material as well. Obviously, a limestone being a bit softer, you've got to be very careful about how you actually apply that. You know what I mean? Like your sandstones and your limestones a little bit softer. Once again, a beautiful natural product, gorgeous. But, you've got to be, that's where it's really handy to have someone like yourself or a designer to be able to talk you through the process. You might have a sandstone, you want to do sandstone, teakwood sandstone around your pool. But you've got chemicals in your pool, you've got full sun area. It's a softer stone. It's going to react to things, and it's potentially going to fade a bit. So it's about getting the right advice. So you might be able to sub that out with a different product that has a similar look, but actually can deal with those elements as well.
Yep. So if you're using limestone or sandstone around a pool, you'd want to do a process called dip sealing. So that's dipping the paver in a sealer which hardens the stone and penetrates the stone, because the paving around the edge of the pool is going to get the most contact with the water. So that's an important process with that. And it's good to do it on any stone, but especially you definitely want to do it with limestone and sandstone. And if you're not wanting to do that process, I find granite and bluestone are a lot more resistant to that salt attack that you get from the salt chlorinated pools. So it does, you can't just use any old product around any old surface.
Yeah. Now, in construction, obviously there's a lot of different elements to landscape construction. We're kind of lucky that we get to have a bit of a dip at each piece. What's your favourite out of the different components of landscaping construction, whether it be retaining wall paving, plants? What's your sort of favourite? Do you have a favourite or not?
I do. Yeah, I like paving, which is not good for my body, but I love doing it the most. So it's it is a bit hard on the back and the knees, but I'm not sure what it is about it, but and I love using all the different pavers as well. So there's a big variety. We do use a lot of bluestone, but again, like I said, it's starting to move towards limestone.
Yeah.
But the only thing I don't like about landscaping is the excavation. So the plants, when they go in, they make the project. Yep. So I love decks and paving, so I'm more of a hardscaping person.
Yep.
But I'm aware that the plants are the heroes of the project. So when they go in, it just looks amazing.
Yeah.
And every now and then, not so much anymore, but we used to do a project and the designer might come and do the plants. But I never liked those because it's the plants are what really make it, and they make the whole thing pop.
And obviously the fact that it's outdoors. Imagine if we could landscape indoors. Amazing. That'd be amazing.
Especially in winter.
Yeah. That's another thing that's not ideal. But, I mean, that sort of hardscapes and things like that, I just want to jump right across the other side here. Now, you've done a bit of work with Melbourne International Flower and Garden Show. You've done a show garden yourself. And, you know a lot of guys through that. Just talk to me a bit about that experience and how that sort of... It's very different landscaping to what we're used to, but, talk us a bit about the Flower and Garden Show and the different connections and how it all works and how I think it's one of the most important parts from a networking point of view for landscapers, but just to be able to do something like that, that's like, in my eyes, like the top of the top show-off sort of situations in the landscape sort of industry, isn't it really?
Yeah, there's people who do it to get work from it, and there's other people who do it just for their ego. So, because if you've got work booked out for 12 months, there's no point going and spending all that money on doing a garden show at the Melbourne International Flower and Garden Show, because you've already got enough work booked in anyway, so it's not going to help. But in regards to the garden show, something that most of the public don't realise is that you're not allowed to penetrate the ground when you're building the show gardens there. So when you see all these 4 metre high structures, there's nothing that's gone into the ground because it's the heritage listed site, the Carlton Gardens. So that was the thing I found most fascinating when I first had to build one. And like you say, the contacts you make there is the best part of it, really.
Yep.
So because you've got 9 days to build the garden, and so there's landscapers and designers all walking around mingling. So you get meeting people from around the state, interstate, and everyone is working towards their own garden. But it's not like it's competitive. So if someone's struggling with something, there's other people who, if they're finished, they'll help them out. I've made a massive amount of contacts from multiple gardens at the garden show.
Yep.
I was a little bit late here today because I was measuring the heights of next year's garden show.
Oh, there you go.
So, and I'm no good at driving in Melbourne, so it took me a lot longer to get here than
no one is, mate, especially when it's wet. So it's and you know, the thing I love, one of the many things I love about Joel in particular is I also did a show garden 2011, and you've done one as well. And mine in particular was, I'm going to be really honest, when I look back on it, it was underwhelming. And it was my first year out in landscaping, and I didn't quite understand the scale and how many plants and how many things actually needed to go into it. I came in a bit naive in that sense. I mean, tell us your like how you went with your experience in regards to the show.
So the first two that I built were a 5 by 5 metre garden, and they were organised by Landscaping Victoria. So there was a student who had done a design, and then because I was a member of Landscaping Victoria, we built the garden for the student because they can't build it themselves. So with those two, we just rocked up. All the materials were there. We had a plan to work off, so everything was sort of done for us. We just had to build it.
Yep.
And then I designed and built my own 2016, the first one. And I got there the first day and it's probably need to organise a bit more than what I had. So it was a bit overwhelming to start with. And then each time you build one, you get better and think about things differently and how you can do better. So now I'm confident enough we can do one of the big ones and we'll get it finished on time, which will be a nice change.
I'm very excited to see that, I tell you right now, because, I mean, yeah, like you said, once you've done it a few times, you sort of understand how it all works. And, you know, when you get to do one after a couple of cracks at it, I think you sort of, you know the industry, you know suppliers, you know a bit about everything. And, yeah, I'm really excited to see that next year because I think that's going to be an absolute cracker because there's some great people doing it next year as well. So I think it's going to be a ripper show, to be honest. Yeah,
it's good that it came back this year as well as it did. So I was a bit worried how it would go, but it was a lot better than what I thought it was going to be. So that's why I was pretty excited to get in again this year. And it just felt like being back home when I was there this year. Like all familiar faces, all the similar people go to the garden show. So yeah, it's a really great place to be, not only for people within the industry, but as a consumer, you get to see a lot of different gardens. So some gardens are realistic that you might use in your own place, but then other ones are more of an artistic piece, which is also interesting to see. They also have their own little elements that you could use in your garden. But it's good that there's something for everyone there.
I feel like I have two very unhealthy sort of addictions. One is Mifkus, and the second one is iced coffee. And I don't think I'm going to give up either. So it's one of those things that sort of takes you, and that's it, isn't it? It's hard to pull away from it once you've done it a couple of times. It's like going overseas. Once you travel, you get the travel bug and off you go. You know what I mean? So it's definitely got that sort of nature about it, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I've spoken to a few people on the podcast who have been there, and they said the exact same thing, that it is addictive after doing your first one, regardless of how well you do. Like the first one that we built, the design and built, we didn't finish it on time as well as we would have liked, but it didn't stop me going back again the next year. And it doesn't matter what if you get a medal or not. It's just competing against yourself, sort of things, like setting yourself that challenge and seeing if you can get it finished on time and to a level of quality that you want.
Yeah, and it's already. I mean, if you're in a position where you can get a show garden, it's already an accomplishment, I believe, to be in that position. You know what I mean? I feel like that in itself is an amazing sort of position to be. You know what I mean? So, you know, and then to obviously pull it off and you know, come up with something amazing is obviously just an extra, really, isn't it?
There are a couple over the years I've seen that it wasn't an achievement to get there because they were very horrible gardens. Basically, generally speaking, I agree 99%. It is a big effort to get there, and there's a lot of organisation, and that's why it's so fascinating seeing people who have been doing it for, like Ian Barker did it for I don't know how many years in a row. And like you said before with your first one, he said a similar thing about his first design there. It was a barley garden called Barley Dreaming, so that's not his style at all. But it's good just to get in there and have a crack.
Absolutely, yeah. Obviously, if you don't know, I did one with Mark Browning this year, and that was his 10th garden, and that's he reckons that's his last, but we'll see. But, 10 show gardens at Mifkus is a massive feat. I mean, I couldn't imagine doing 10 show gardens at Mifkus. It'd be lovely, but just when you're in the process and you realise how much goes into it, it's a massive effort, really.
Yeah, I think also one of the things about why those gardens might be good is because as a designer, you don't have a client that might compromise what you're wanting to do. So the design is exactly what the designer wants to do. And I've spoken to other designers who have their best projects are when the clients have given them free rein. So they found a designer they love, and they just said, just do what you want to do with the project. And so that's an interesting thought about the way to get a good garden. Like, there's obviously going to be things that you want in there, but yeah, giving a designer a lot of free range, it can be beneficial to the end result.
So make sure you keep an eye out for this man's design next year at Mifkus. Please keep an eye out. Keep updated on your social media. I'm going to flip it across a little bit. You've obviously done a lot for the block as well. So let's just talk a little bit about the block. Obviously there's more common people that we know about the block, but obviously you've done some landscaping on the block. How did you find that?
Yeah, so I was a fan of the show, and so I was curious to see what it was going to actually be like behind the scenes.
Yep.
And it's actually harder than what they show on TV, which I don't understand. I thought they would make it, like, they really ham things up and make things look harder than what they are, but they actually make it look easier than what it is. So it is literally, like, the first garden we had to build, we started on a Friday at 1 o'clock and then had to finish it by the Sunday. Yep. So yeah, it's just insane. But I love doing things that push the limits.
Yep.
Like, I've done a kayaking marathon, like 404 Ks over 5 days. I've run 2 marathons and 6 half marathons. So I like pushing myself. Yep. And that's why I like doing the block, because you've got to work massive days to get it done when you're not working 2 days.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's really, it's similar to the garden show, because you're working around a lot of other trades. And most of them have got a good attitude about being there. They're just having a bit of fun doing something different.
Yep. How unrealistic is it to a real life garden?
Well, it's hard to say, because it's realistic, because it's not like it's done in 2 weeks and they only show 1 week.
That's right.
So we do what gets shown. So technically it's realistic, but it's not sustainable.
Yeah.
And some of the quality is not as good as what you would do in the real world as well. So we'd be pouring a concrete slab that we'd lay pavers on, and on the block you're laying pavers the next day, whereas you'd want to leave it for at least a week or two to cure properly. So there's things that the quality isn't as good. So it depends what's getting done, but it's technically, it is what it is on TV, so it's achievable, but it's not sustainable.
Yeah. It's also over-engineered a lot, so obviously in those situations where they don't have much time to, if they do make a change, it's got to be a big change to make sure that they ensure that there's no problem structurally. So there's a lot involved in that in regards to trying to make those changes on the fly and everything else. But it's just it's one of those ones you got to, from a client's point of view, you got to understand that it's a little bit different than real life, because in real life we have real budgets. Like you said, there's processes to everything, so we make sure that we work within those processes, and so it's a great platform for us, but also at the same time it's one of those platforms where you just got to be very careful, because we don't want to mislead the public as to how quick projects actually can go ahead. There's obviously processes involved that makes those processes a little bit longer in real life.
Yeah, we just built a deck and a pergola on a project, and it took us, I think it was 7 days of building.
Yep.
Whereas if it was on the block, you could do that in 2 days.
Yep.
But it's just, no one wants to pay the overtime for having 6 guys there for 15 hours a day. So there's also the inspections. So all the inspections are pre-booked on the block for if you've got digging footings.
Yep.
Whereas in real life, you've got to book it out days in advance and make sure it's done properly. So there's a lot of things that aren't realistic on there, but
And just in regards to obviously your work, how many blokes do you have in your crew?
I've got 2 qualified guys and myself, and looking to put on for a new apprentice, or so a younger person as well.
Yep. And you're looking at that magic number. What is it? About 6, is it?
No, 3 for me. Yeah.
3. Yep.
Yeah. Because so a lot of guys who have bigger crews, don't necessarily make more money than people with smaller ones. So it's just more headaches, more people are taking holidays and getting sick. And so I'm happy with 3 because I'm more of a landscaper than a business owner. So I'm better at landscaping than actually running a business. Whereas other people are better at business than landscaping. So they can do all the project management and people management better than what I can. So you sort of need to know what you're good at and focus on that.
Absolutely. Lovely. Now, does anyone have any questions for Joel just while we're going ahead? Anyone's got any questions? No stupid questions, because look at me, I'm the stupidest person you ever meet. So yeah, here we go. We've got one. I'll just grab it. I'll come back. Now, Joel, how do these lovely people get in touch with you? What's the best way to get in touch with someone like yourself?
Through our website, so the email address is on there. There's a contact form on there. But we only work in Geelong.
Yep. So, InStyle Gardens, check out his website. I'm guessing it's www.instylegardens.com.au.
Yeah, very creative.
So, so make sure you check him out. If you've got any questions after the show, hit Joel up. Obviously on social media as well. He's obviously InStyle Gardens and he's the Landscape Podcast. So you can reach him both ways there. But yeah, like I said, if you're out that way, Geelong area, you need a really, really quality contractor. Obviously, Joel's someone you need to speak to. So, fantastic. Give him a round of applause. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, legend.
Thanks.